You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets.
All right, let's roll. Welcome back to another episode of The Builder's Mindset. So today, I want to talk about how home building is a lot like running. Go figure. Those of you who knew me, you knew it was only a matter of time before I got to this one, right? And I dive a little bit deeper into what home builders and their trade partners can learn from running, and more importantly, maybe not more importantly, don't mean to offend anybody who's not, but is a runner, ultra running. And I was just checking it out. So the technical definition for an ultra marathon is anything longer than a traditional marathon. They usually start at 50K. I have a friend though who likes to call those baby ultras. And so you also hear them refer to that, sometimes like an ultra, they run ultras. And so generally though, if you're going to talk about racing, they start at 50K, which is about 31 miles. And they go up to now what is 309 miles is the longest one I know of, but I'm sure there are longer. The Arizona Monster, its inaugural running will be in April of 2025. And yes, yours truly is signed up for the Arizona Monster, and I will be running that. But I digress. Let's get back to what can home builders learn from running, and not more importantly, ultra running. And why do I say that? Look, a lot of people run. It's become, it actually seems like it's becoming more and more popular these days. The number of shoe companies, et cetera, that are out on the market. But it reminds me of, I think it was from Weatherman, and Will Ferrell is talking about jogging or yogging. That, back in like the 70s and 80s when you had track and field and all that, but like for the recreational person, running wasn't really a thing, and jogging sort of became a thing. And maybe I'll have to do a whole episode on what's the difference between running and jogging. But listen, like if you're a runner and you don't have to run races, some people just run because they like running and it keeps them healthy. It's a great way to burn calories. And but if you're a runner and you're competitive even with yourself, there's a lot that goes into training, planning, and dedication to run a 5K. If you're competitive or not. I go out to these 5Ks sometimes and I see people who are out there and it's pretty clear that they might be doing their first one. They're doing the run walk thing. My daughter and I, a couple of years ago, 4th of July, we did a 5K together and we did a run walk, and I was so proud of her. And I'm proud of anybody that I see that gets out and does anything movement wise to improve their body and their health. And I feel the same way for companies, for owners and teams, in particular, like home building is my world, but home builders and trade partners who say to themselves, you know what, I can be better tomorrow than I was yesterday, and I'm going to put a plan in place. I'm going to practice that plan, and I'm going to perform so that I can show up and execute on the goals that I set and what I'm set out to achieve. And so whether it's a 5K, 10K, half marathon, full, or an ultra, like we said, everywhere from, 31 miles to 300 plus miles. And so, there's a lot, I think, that home builders and their trade partners can learn from running. You really, if you're going to be competitive, even competitive with just yourself, and let's start right there. That, I think, is a big thing. Compete with yourself. If you're elite, that's a whole other thing. If you're elite, you're probably not listening to my podcast to get tips on, how to go from, 10th place to 5th place in the Western States endurance run. Look, maybe I'm wrong, but if you're the CEO of one of the top 10 public home builders, you're probably also not listening to my podcast to get tips. But if I'm wrong and you are, feel free to call. I'd be happy to go to coffee with you and share the things that I've learned in the industry. But once again, I digress back to the planning and practice and performing. If you are trying to better yourself in running, sports, physical, mental, business, first off, kudos to you. Like, give yourself a pat on the back because you're actually trying to get better. And when I think of running, it's a combination of the physical and the mental aspect to do something that is extremely difficult in today's day and age. Humans are born to run, but if you want to go run a sub 20-minute 5K, maybe that's your goal. Or maybe your goal is a sub 24-hour 100-miler. Maybe your goal is a sub 100-minute half. Maybe your goal is just to finish a 5K, period. Maybe your goal is to finish a marathon without walking. Let's start by looking at all of those goals from a builder perspective, and we've talked about this a little bit before. Let's think of all those goals as the different target consumer groups that you can go after as a home builder. Okay, so, and I'm not going to say that 5Ks are entry level, because you all know I love ultra marathons and I also love entry level, so I would never do that. But let's just hypothetically look at it like that. You've got entry level, move up, second move up, luxury, custom, and all manner of kind of variations in between. And I've seen builders split and splice and dice it all the way to, I've seen builders with 7 spec levels and 30 product lines, and they wonder why they're not great at anything. And so does that mean, just like in running, you can't do more than one? No, it doesn't. But if you're trying to execute on a goal and be better than you were yesterday, and when I say yesterday, hypothetically, right, your prior self, just imagine if, and look, if you have to have a goal as to what you're going to try to be, okay? And we all know if you try to be too many things to too many people, you're going to struggle to be great at any of those. And so when we talk about preparing for a run or a race, the race is the goal, okay? The distance is the goal, and you have to practice, you have to perform, but you have to start with a plan. And that plan has to be, what am I going to go after? Am I going to go run a sub 20-minute 5K? If that's your goal, your training is going to look a lot different than if you're training for the Western States Endurance 100-mile run. It's going to be different. If you're doing 5Ks and 10Ks, you're probably going to be doing a lot more shorter runs with speed work. If you're doing, half and full marathons, you're probably going to be doing longer runs. You're still going to be doing some speed work, but you're also going to start to increase the volume. If you're running for ultra marathons, whatever distance they are, you're going to start to put traditionally a little bit more emphasis on the volume. You're also going to incorporate some hills because a lot of those are going to happen on trails and you're going to have some elevation with those. You're still going to do some speed work, right? Because you want to it's sort of, you got to do all of those, and none of them are right or wrong. And now it's interesting is that volume is a whole different story we talk about from another perspective and relate that to home building. But you have to have a plan of what you're going to target. Are you going after entry level or are you going after custom? Now look, do I say you can't do more than one? No, I don't say that. But in my experience, in my history, I have seen builders that just go look at land, and this land is suited for custom or very high end, and we're going to buy that. And then the next piece of land is like entry level, and but it's a good deal, so we're going to buy that. And so you have these builders who are really doing either anything. They'll build anything for any piece of property. So they'll do entry level, move up, second move up. They'll do luxury. They'll do sort of semi-custom, and they'll argue to themselves all day long that the semi-custom is just luxury, but it's really semi-custom. And so they're trying to build a system or run a business around all of that. And they're different. Just like a training plan for a 5K is going to look a lot different than a training plan for a marathon or an ultra marathon. And the difficult thing is trying to do them both at the same time is really challenging. And I'm not saying some people can't run 5 and 10Ks at personal bests in the same month or week that they're going to go run a 50K or a 50 miler. I'm not saying, like there are people who can do that. They're usually really well seasoned individuals though, who have been running for a long time. And just like with builders, if you're going to try to, run all of those races, meet the needs of all those customers, I hope you're a very well seasoned builder who has all of your processes dialed in really, really well. Otherwise, you're going to struggle and you're going to burn your team out. So you want to pick a plan. What's the race you're going to go run? Who are you going after? What's your clientele? And try to focus on how do we become the best for them. That's where the practice comes in. Once you pick that, now you can practice. In that practice, we talked about, speed and short and volume and whatnot. Now you can start to look at that and go, what are reasonable expectations for our cycle time? How fast we want to build these houses? What are reasonable expectations for our cost per square foot, our finished lots per square foot, our margins? And we could put a plan in place that centers around that buyer, that race, and that gives us the best shot of performing better tomorrow than we did yesterday as it relates to that particular race, and or as the analogy we're working on here goes, is that client. And so when you put that plan in place, not every plan is going to look the same. There are new things that are coming out now in the running world and the training world. There's a lot of talk about like low volume training. Traditional marathon training, a marathon is 26.2 miles. Traditional marathon training, you never actually run a marathon distance in your training, in most training plans that I've looked at and studied. And when I was new to that distance and just kind of a newer runner, that was kind of surprising to me. I was, what do you mean I'm not going to actually go out and perform a 26-mile run before I show up for the race? And it's because you look at the whole picture and package of that training. You build up your training and you are doing longer runs, and you typically max out at about 18 to 20 miles. And in that week that you do that 20-mile training run, you're probably also running 3 other times, and you're probably maxing out, let's say, in the neighborhood of 40 or 50 miles. So you're running 40 to 50 miles in the week with a 20-mile run. And then as you lead into the race and you get ready to actually show up for the race, you'll scale back. You'll take a break. We call it taper. You taper back for a couple weeks, and now your body is like built up this volume base, and it's ready to show up from that perspective. So there's some new things that are coming out now where, and if you think about that, you'd never run 100 miles to train for a 100-mile race. As a matter of fact, that's when it starts to get unique. A lot of weekly running, even volumes, don't even get to 100 miles when you're training for 100 miles. They kind of cap out at like 70, 80, or 90. And so there's actually even now a lot of programs that are coming out which are even lower volume, where you focus more very strategic, very targeted running, let's call it 40 to 70 miles a week. and you still show up and you run 100 miles. So I was forced to do this recently. My last 100 miler was the Javelina 100 in Arizona, and I hit a wall about 6 to 8 weeks before the race. And you'd normally taper 2 to 3 weeks before the race, or 2 weeks before the race. And I just got to a place where I was fatigued, my body was tired, mentally I didn't feel like running anymore. And I started talking with my coach, and we decided that, well, I guess we're going to go into some low volume training, because if you keep pushing like this, you're probably going to hurt yourself mentally and or physically. And so even if it's not ideal that we start tapering 6 to 8 weeks before, we agreed that if we kept pushing, we were going to break the system. Lo and behold, I think I ran less than 40 miles for the 6 to 7 weeks leading up to that race. And I did really, really well at that race. And so there's a lot of plans that are coming out now around this low volume perspective. And then there's also a lot of like hydration and nutrition things that are coming around that are starting to adapt. And look at these like new technologies, right? You got to be flexible when you're putting your plan and your target customer and who you're going after. You want to be flexible, but not a wet noodle, okay? What do I mean there? It's okay if, as you're setting up your new systems, your new process, your new plans, your new programs, your new processes, if you're looking, you're like, this just isn't right, we need to adjust. As long as it's in pursuit of the goal, the bigger goal, then great, try it. Sometimes new things come out. You're struggling with something from a process perspective. Maybe it's software. There's a new software that comes out that you want to try, and you think, once again, that new technique will help you in pursuit of the goal that you already established, then think about this. If I'm midway through a 4-month training plan to get ready for a marathon or a 50K or a 50 miler, I'm 2 months into a 4-month training plan, I'm only going to adjust my practice, my training, what I'm executing day in and day out, if I am confident it is going to help me perform better than I was planning, or gives me a higher chance of success on race day. I'm also definitely not a month before the race going to decide, you know what, I don't like that race. I think instead of doing the 50 miler that I've been training for the last 3 months, I'm gonna sign up for the 150 miler, or the 135 miler, or the 100 miler. So we've got to establish goals, and so running marathons and longer take a long time to get to that place where you have that ability to execute at that volume level on a given day. And so the same thing in home building is, where you are today is the product of all of the decisions, all of the choices, and everything that you put in place and everything you've been working on, good, bad, or indifferent, over the last year, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you need to be really careful about changing your practice plan, or being that wet noodles, like, oh, we're going to try the latest thing, like this is this new thing, or, oh, that's not working, so we're just going to scrap that and throw it out. Did you give it enough time to really work? It's another thing. When we're practicing and training for long runs, you sometimes have days where things don't go well. And what we say, those are gifts. Why are those gifts? Because I say to myself, it's going to be tough to get to that next race and show up my best. And I'm not going to have a great day every day. And I'm having a not so great day today. And guess what? It's not race day. So thankfully, I'm having that not so great day on a day that's not race day. So when we're trying to get processes or plans or programs implemented as home builders, don't go 30, 60, 90 days and you don't see the results you're hoping for and say, it's not working, and scrap it. You just threw away all the work you put into that by trying to get to that point. Sit down, have an assessment of how it's actually doing. Is it really performing as badly as you thought? Or are you just not where you want to be yet? You haven't turned that corner? Or is it, really a bad process. Be thoughtful about it. Be mindful about it. So just like in practice, we don't throw out our training plans just because we have a bad day or a bad week even. We reevaluate, we reassess, and we might adjust what we do the next week a little bit. Maybe we take the volume down a little bit because we feel like we're getting a little bit fatigued, or maybe we're feeling really good and we're like, okay, we can ratchet it up a little bit. So be really thoughtful of that. So pick your race and then put a plan in place that you're going to execute day in and day out until you achieve the goal. And the goal is the race. And so that might be for you, it might be a community that you're going to target and you're going to give a shot at trying this new consumer group because you think that's going to give you, an advantage going forward, and you're thinking about shifting your business and you want to see, can you execute on that entry level when you've historically done, more second move up in luxury, or maybe it's second move up in luxury and you've historically done entry level. Can you perform on that level? Can you get your specs right? Can you get your trade partners to perform the way you need to? And so you're working towards showing up on race day. And then when you show up on race day, here's the interesting thing about gauging how that went. If it's a distance you've never done before from longer than you've ever done, just showing up and starting is a win. Having a good day is a win, and finishing is a huge win. Even if you're DFL, and DFL is in Raceland, it's dead frickin' last. Some people say, dead. Yeah, you get it. But you finished, and that's a win. And so now you can build off of that. So if you start to be a little bit more targeted and scale back what you're going to do, what customers you're going to focus on, just think of the time and the energy and the planning and the practicing that you can put into place to making that function for that customer group that much better. And then you won't end up like one of these builders who has 8 spec levels and 14 product lines. And then maybe you'll start to get to this place where you're like, oh, I'm really, really good at this. And from a racing perspective, you'll see this. There are people who are really good at the 100 miler. There are people who are really good at the 50 miler. There are people who are really good at the 50K. And there are people who are really good about marathons. And that's what we hear a lot about that. The thing we don't hear a lot about is, 5Ks are really hard. And I have a lot of friends who say they would rather run a 50K than a 5K, because you don't run a 5K at a 50K pace. So it's not like you're out if you're running a 5K, no matter what speed you're doing, if it's your first 5K, it's hard. If it's your 100th 5K, you're probably out there because you're trying to go faster than you did your last one, and it's hard. So building homes for entry-level buyers, it's not easy. It's hard. Building affordable homes is hard. Look, everybody knows, if you listen to any of my podcasts, just a couple of them, I'm a big advocate of trying to help the supply-demand balance on affordable housing. And that's my forte, that's my niche, from product development all the way through to contracting and execution, implementation. And I just say, though, whatever you choose to do, try not to be pizza and be everything to everyone. Try to pick one or two and be the best you can at one or two. Now, with that, here's an interesting one. What does that mean, to be the best? And this permeates a lot of what I've seen in my 20 years in home building. We think being the best is something that we define as a comparison to our competition. Well, so-and-so builder over there includes this. So-and-so builder over there includes this. So we need to include this and this. And what happens is two things. Number one, You assess the 7 or 8 builders who are around you the closest. They all make their pizza differently. They've got different toppings. One likes Hawaiian, one likes veggie, one likes a meat lovers, one likes plain cheese, one likes plain just pepperoni. And you feel like you got to compete with all of them. And your pizza ends up having so much shit on it. It's like this smorgasbord that you have everything that everybody wants, but nobody ends up liking it. Why? Because it costs more than everybody else. Or you don't end up liking it because now your margins suck because you've done too much. And that's because you're running too many races against too many people, and you're trying to compete against all of them. Rather than saying, this is going to be my niche or my 2 niches, I'm going to learn them very well, and I'm going to be my own competition. Don't compete against your competitors on product and spec. Is it okay to go look at what they do and see what they do and reflect on it? Absolutely. But don't be a me too. Like, oh, they've got that, me too. They've got that, me too. They've got that, me too. Next thing you know, you've got everything that all the competitors have, and your costs are out of line, out of whack. So remember, you're competing against yourself. You want to improve your margins? Work on your internal processes. You just do that, and you'll improve your margins. Next, you want to improve your margins? Pick 1 or 2 customer groups that you can really hone in. Pick the 2 that you already know the best, and refine your product and your specs down to 2 or 3 spec levels, one per group. A refined option program that goes in line with that so that your systems flow together and it's smooth and easy. Then work on your product and dial that in from a constructability and a value perspective. And now you'll really start to improve your margins. And then you'll have some of that flexibility to adjust your costs and adjust your sell price and do other things to be more competitive. And then listen, last but not least, remember, after a race, we recover. So if you do all of these things and you execute, just like I do in ultramarathons, if you execute your plan and you practice that plan and then you go out and perform, we like to recover after we've met a threshold, met a milestone, or achieved a goal, or beat our time from last time, our personal best now. Take some time. And they say after a 100-mile race, it takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, or some people even say as much as 3 months, to fully recover. Sit back for a little bit. Don't rest on your laurels, but watch. Celebrate and embrace what you've just accomplished. Look at how it's performing and ask yourself, when I'm done recovering, what can I do to do better tomorrow than I did yesterday? You keep doing that, and it's a win-win, and it doesn't matter who your competition is. Hey, thanks again for listening. Thanks again to all the folks who continue to reach out and tell me how much they enjoy the podcast. We enjoy it too. That's why we keep showing up. We keep doing it. And we hope you have a great 2025. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets. Remember, your mindset matters,